Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mic check. I just wanted to do that. It's so much thing with streaming, and you don't know if it's working. You see that pregnant pause or that moment. This is the Chicken Box, you guys. I hope you're having a fantastic week, a fantastic day. I hope you're enjoying life and really taking in what it has to offer. I'm Kevin Impeccable Peck, along with my co-host, Misha Green, the DC or the digital content or the District of Columbia. She's holding down. Well, on the internet, you're holding down the world, Misha. How are you this afternoon? I'm gonna check on you. How you feeling today?
Thank you. I'm feeling good. It's a beautiful Thursday here in the DMV. And feeling very thankful that I can be here with everybody today and talk about this important subject on Chicken Box.
This is Black people versus and this is not DC or D. This is domestic violence. Everybody, Black people versus domestic violence. It is prevalent in our community, in our country, and we want to talk about it. We want to understand it. We want to know when it's happening. We want to be able to be there and help people who are going through it, and we want to just talk about the conversation. If you've never tuned into the Chicken Box before and you're not from Baltimore, Chicken Box is four wings and fries, y'all. And some people call it an Arnold Palmer. Some people call it a half and half sweet tea lemonade. You get yourself a chicken box. It's lunchtime, some places, breakfast time, some places. And that's what we do. But here on the Afro, the Chicken Box, we're dispelling myths. We're breaking stereotypes. We're informing, educating, and inspiring. This media outlet has been doing it for the last 129 years. And we're excited that we're able to provide information to people where sometimes they would not get it because the mainstream, sometimes news or the other news would not like to share these things. So when you get on the box, you're speaking your truth, and we're going to be speaking our truth about Black people versus domestic violence today. I'm excited. Dr. Draper is traveling. There was a funeral in the family, and it seems like funerals are coming a lot these days, and that you don't want to be desensitized to them, but it's just a part of life, and you keep going. I act like it's not in my family too, but it is. But she's traveling. I'm here, and we're going to get into this topic today. Misha, do you want to bring in our first guest, or what? Actually, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right?
So yeah, that's why I'm rocking my purple. Well, first of all of y'all who are regularly watch the show gonna be like, Misha, that is not why you're rocking your purple. You wear purple all the time. It's your favorite color. And yes, that is true. My phone is purple. Purple is my thing. But also the reason why I think here recently and in adulthood I've had so much pride is because it does stand for so much, like domestic violence. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so I'm rocking my purple because of that. It also stands for other things such as lupus, Crohn's, and things that are very important and near dear to me, as well as domestic violence. So
that's well as royalty, right?
Huh?
The God's color.
I mean, royalty.
Let's add some positive light.
Well, no, it definitely. I think all of it is positive. I think that though we're talking about things that are difficult, the fact that it can represent something and show as a sign of awareness, I think is a positive thing, and a wake up call to people. But you're right, it is royalty as well. It is the color of royalty and can remind people that things are regal. And I think that's what you get when you think of all those things, is that we are still strong and still powerful despite some of the hard things that we face. So yeah.
Well, I have to share. I didn't tell us to share it because this is Black people versus domestic violence, and I didn't tell us to share it. And I'm going just hit the little arrow because it may not be for you, but it may be for somebody that you know that you can help out. This information, if it just helps one person, is very important. So as again I said, this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Also, this is the Afro's monthly We're Still Here special edition, which is dealing with the mind, body, and spirit. And so what a great topic to jump into. Misha, you have anything you want to say about the We're Still Here edition? Because after 129 years of publishing, we typically, if we had a story, we would just put it in the paper. But this year, we have committed entire editions to different topics. And again, this is Mind, Body, and Spirit Month. We're Still Here edition out. Anything you want to add, Misha, about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up, that this has been our special edition is always something that is really important and talks about things prevalent to the Black community. And so in this edition, we're taking a look at mind, body, and spirit. And our editorial team is really breaking up those things. Not only how can we take care of those three things, but also sharing stories of survival, looking in the Afro's archive, which goes back almost 130 years, and how we historically have been telling stories of survival and also helping people find resources for things like domestic violence, sharing stories. Even, when I go into the archives and look for Afro facts, I see stories about women who were able to escape really negative things in the Afro-American newspapers in the 1920s, and so I'm really inspired by the fact that the Afro is looking at the importance of mind, body, and spirit in communities of color, and how we have historically put that first here at the Afro newspaper, and how we're continuing to do it as Afro media. And so this We're Still Here will touch on all those things. And we want you all to be a part of this too. We are still accepting survival stories. If you have a survival story that you want to share, please share it with us at editor@afro.com. That's editor@afro.com. Check us out. And let us know what you've gone through and how you've been able to thrive despite some difficult odds. We all have survival stories, right?
Well, this week has been a difficult odds. Before we get into it, we just started the stream. Last week or this week or whenever it was when Facebook shut down.
Yes.
IG shut down, right? So I'm looking at the stream. I'm looking for it to share on my page.
Okay,
I'm like, wait a minute, are they still shut down? I had to go back and look. But this is Black people versus domestic violence. But
I don't know if people
violent when a lot of people got violent this week when they couldn't get on IG and Facebook. They were up in arms. But I think it's shared now.
Okay, good. Because I was literally about to text you, like I'm in my text thread about to be like, I'm trying to share us and I can't find us on. This always happens though. When we're talking about something that the people need to know and that the people really should care about, technology want to hold us back.
Let's get to our guests, and hopefully you guys, sorry if the stream wasn't coming through, but welcome. I'm glad we can see you. Hi, Joel. I'm glad we can hear you. Man. All right. So this is Black people versus domestic violence. We're going to get into it. Can you introduce and welcome to the Chicken Box our special guest?
Yes, I can.
Pagan. Is it Hale or Hallie?
It's Hale. It's Pagan Hale. Yes.
Pagan. All right, get me together.
Yes. Pagan Hale, who is just absolutely amazing and has done like 40 different things, which I was reading her bio and just being like, when does this woman sleep? And apparently the answer is never.
No, I don't sleep.
Look, but you can't, right? Because the work is important, and yes. I just, I think we all are so thankful for people like you. So let me brag about Cynthia Pagan Hale for a second. She is CEO of FFT Helping Others and founder of the National Domestic Violence Rally in 2019, 2020, and now just happened last week in 2021 in front of the Washington Capitol. She attended James Madison University to gain an education degree and a minor in computer programming. And she's recently been working on her psychology bachelor's and working towards her political science and law degrees at Regent University. She also has a certification as a neuroplasticity informed specialist from the University of Michigan. I told y'all she doesn't sleep.
I gotta know what that is. But anyway, keep going.
She's certified as a youth and mental health aid provider, CDC domestic violence advocate, GGA anti-bullying prevention specialist, and a My Body is My Body program representative and certified specialist. I'm not done. She also is a talk show host for Guidance to Good Heart from the DMV area with Mix Station Radio. She's a 26-year survivor of military abuse, and she's used that experience to devote her life to starting transitional homes for survivors all across the United States. She speaks to many politicians close to the Washington Capitol and her home, and she speaks to many senators and representatives about the growing issues in the military, about human trafficking, about child abuse, sexual assault, and violent crimes in many states. So we really appreciate your work and service, Cynthia, and thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here with you guys and excited to be in the chicken box. And yes, I get my chicken box. I know what that means. I've been in the DMV. I am in the DMV now, but I used to be in DC, so I know what that means.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. You're gonna make me hungry because
I know, right?
But this is Black people versus domestic violence. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Thank you for your comments. We're gonna be sharing. Thank you, Yvette, Bonnie, Chippy, Jewel, and everybody else. Feel free to share, and we will try to get your comments in. But why don't you tell us just a little bit? We gave this elaborate resume, which just says you are passionate about, like, what I see in your name is that you're passionate about helping others.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes rare because a lot of people are selfish. And I like to say, stop being so selfish. You know, if you just would put yourself aside and help somebody else in a way that you could help them. You can't help them like Misha can or like Impeccable can, but you can help them like Cynthia can. So just tell us about, what sparks you to create helping others, FFT helping others.
What's funny, FFT helping others, and I'll give you a synopsis of where the name came from. Me and my sons, both of my sons were domestically abused. And they're the ones that came up with the name FFT helping others, which means family, friend, togetherness, helping others. And it's because during the time that we were domestically abused, we felt like we were alone in a desert. And a lot of people who are domestically abused feel like they don't have anybody. They feel alone. They feel like they don't have anyone. And so FFT helping others means without family, without friends, you really need to help others. And it's really imperative to be able to work alongside with each other, partner with one another, be helping one another so that we can move forward, we can heal, we can move forward away from the issues of sexual assault and abuse and child maltreatment and domestic violence and these issues. And although those wounds will still be there, we still can fight a good fight. And but it takes all of us working together to be survivors, and not be victims anymore. And it really takes all of us, families working together, survivors working together, friends working together. And so, it takes each and every one of us. And so I was a victim of 26 years ago, I was a victim of military domestic violence, which was the worst thing ever. It's really different than just civilian domestic violence, although civilian domestic violence is horrible. A lot of times when you're in the military, you really can't approach your commanding, post officers or anything like that because they don't want to listen to you. And so especially when those people are being either sexually assaulted or there's issues of child maltreatment or things like that. And although there's articles, and I know a lot of people are going, what are articles? Although military members have articles that really are placed there to tell them, hey, you can't do these specific things in the military to abuse your family or things like that. There's still a lot of issues that are going on in the military. And so right now we're helping a lot of these families who are going through problems of domestic violence. And not only that, we want to help military service members too, who might be going through trauma themselves. And we want everyone to heal. It's not just domestic violence victims, but we want service members to heal too, because a lot of stuff resurfaces after basic training or coming back from Afghanistan or whatever the case may be. It resurfaces and they don't even know that they were domestically abused as a child or they were abused themselves. So that's one factor that we go through,
Absolutely. So, you got family and friends coming together, because Jocelyn said isolation, and that is what you don't want to be. I mean, and that is what some of the tactics are to try to isolate you to a thought, to a position, to a threat, to a place that makes you feel like you're helpless.
Yes.
And really, with the family and friends, you can get help. Right. You have to, and it's not easy to break out of it, but it's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think the awareness of it, since this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, is what we want to do at the Chicken Box. And I appreciate Lenora, Diane, Jocelyn, Yvette, Bonnie, Chippy, everybody who's jumping in on the conversation, because it is an important conversation, and your courage in the chat brings healing just to somebody. Okay, do me a favor, hit the share button, guys, if you're watching this on Facebook, and share it with the groups you're in, with the pages you're in. Somebody is in isolation right now, right? And they're going through a traumatic domestic violence experience, and they need help. And they might not know how to get it. They might not know where to get it. But before we leave, it's gonna definitely be here. Thank you, everybody who is continuing to share. We have our special guest, Cynthia. Can I just call you Cynthia?
Yes.
Yes. It feels like I got to say your whole name when I see it.
No. Yes. Please call me that.
Misha and Dr. Draper is traveling, for those who are used to her. We claim our generations. I'm Generation X. Misha is a millennial boomer. She likes to think she's a boomer sometimes.
Yes.
How about you, Cynthia?
I'm Generation X.
Okay. All right, there we go. All right, here we go. Put in your generation in the chat. We would like to be multi-generations, because domestic violence can start at an infant in the baby age, when a child cannot even speak sometimes, when a child cannot in no way defend themselves.
Yes.
And it goes all the way up the line. So we just like to do the generation thing, but let's keep it going. I don't know if everybody has a clear definition, Misha, of really what domestic violence is, because we were talking off camera before it, and it's a lot of things that it falls under to. But then there's some stereotypes that people have said and thought of what domestic violence is. So maybe if you just can get a definition, and Cynthia, you can help chime into it if it, and make sure we're on the right page. Misha?
Yeah.
Definitely, because I learned so much even the 5 minutes before we got on camera from Cynthia, just about the breakdown of the different kinds of domestic violence. I think even the digital streets, which we'll talk about in a second, and the stereotypes really focus on the ones we regularly talk about. So physical and mental abuse within the household, spanning between intimate partners, children, etc. And so that is sort of the definition that is widely accepted. But you opened my eyes, like I said, in just minutes about the different kinds of abuses. So I'd love for you to chime in. This is the definition that we are working with today from the United Nations. And they have domestic abuse, also called domestic violence or intimate partner violence, can be defined as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner.
Right.
Abuse is physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes any behaviors that frighten, intimidate, terrorize, manipulate, hurt, humiliate, blame, injure, or wound someone.
Mm.
Domestic abuse can happen to anyone of any race, age, sexual orientation, religion, or gender. It can occur within a range of relationships, including couples who are married, living together, or dating. Domestic violence affects people of all socioeconomic backgrounds and education levels. Anyone can be a victim of domestic violence. So that is the United Nations definition. I'd love to hear Cynthia's very experienced definition of it as the expert. Just because, I think we still were missing, for example, in that definition, military use.
Yeah.
I mean, you heard sort of the power play piece to it, which we know is an important aspect, but from your experience, both as an advocate and what you've gone through, I'd love to hear your definition and how you explain it to people when you're helping them.
Yeah. So intimate partner violence or domestic violence, and usually I like to go to the CDC for this, and even the American Journal of Medicine, is that intimate partner violence can most definitely occur within an abusive or an aggressive relationship, whether it be family, whether it be a current partner or former partner, a dating partner, an intimate partner, or a family member. And so a lot of people think, oh, well, does it have to be a partner that I'm with? And of course, I tell them, no, domestic violence can be among family members. And so that type of violence can occur even in a heterosexual, a same-sex couples, sexual intimacy without sexual intimacy. It might happen one time, it might happen several times within your whole span of your lifetime. And so it can happen between two brothers, a mother and a daughter, a grandmother and a granddaughter. And so a lot of time people think that domestic violence and reported domestic violence happens to be within a heterosexual same-sex couples or sexually intimate couples. Over 45 million women and about 38 million men experience psychological aggression by an intimate partner within their lifetime. And that's reported by the CDC. And we know that at about 20,000 phone calls are done within the hotline daily. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's done within intimate partners. It can be within family members, within that whole entire span of that day. So we think 1 in 4 women or 1 in 10 men, which is what we see in the statistics of the experience of either sexual violence or physical violence or stalking within the lifetime, that's concern for safety, happens to be what the CDC says, but they don't describe what in the 1 in 4 women or what in the 1 in 10 men. That can be 2 men, that can be a father and a son, that can be a mother and its daughter. So that number can constitute a statistic that could be within your family group. And so we don't really know. And again, these numbers can be skewed as well within either WHO, which is the World Health Organization, or the UN or the CDC. Also with the psychiatry of journal, and also even the World Women's Journal, where we get a lot of our statistics. Just because a lot of it is unreported, or sometimes it can be reported maybe just once. So we also don't get a lot of numbers that are reported within the LGBTQ community, you know? So that also isn't placed in there as well. So that's what my take on what is the definition of reported or unreported, or what is the definition of what is intimate partner or domestic violence. It is the feeling of unmanageable or preventive violence towards a family member, or not even a family member. It could just be someone who you're sexually involved with or are not sexually involved with.
Wow, it's interesting because I feel like you make such a good point about the unreported cases. And I wonder, in all the sort of research that I've been doing about this topic, particularly the stereotypes and stigmas, how little it's been reported during this pandemic, for one, and two, in communities of color. Our other guest, who we appreciate him, we see he's trying to get in. For some reason, technology, Mercury is in retrograde right now, and technology is not working for folks. And so hopefully he'll be able to get on. But we were actually talking earlier about the stigma and the accepted nature of domestic violence, unfortunately, in communities of color. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit on that, and then I'll share the stereotypes and that I found on these digital streets. But I was wondering if you could speak a bit on that.
Sure. So the Journal of Women's Health, which I'm really big on reading anything that has to do with psychiatry or women's health, or anything that has to do pretty much with the National Institute of Health, pretty much just about any of that. We probably are Black, brown, and others. We are probably the highest amounts of domestic violence that you will find anywhere. 42.4 million women experience rape, physical violence, stalking, but we're probably the highest. Our ethnic women, specifically minority women, because of the disproportionate effect of IPV, according to the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, says that we're probably the highest rates. We're about 43.7%. Then it would be for a non-Hispanic white woman or a Black woman who is in a disproportionately affected area. So we deal with way more issues. And the reason why this is, and the Women of Health has actually even said this, is because, one, we don't get paid as much as others would. That's one. Two, we deal with the areas in which we live in. We are influenced by our environments, and that's a big thing. The socioeconomic disparities that we have to deal with, and mitigates how we deal with our problems at home. Also, another thing that is a problem is the way that we deal with mental health. We don't talk about mental health. We don't deal with mental health. And so we don't visit mental health providers. Had we visited mental health providers, you don't see a lot of Hispanic women going, I got to go and see a mental health provider today. We just don't do it. We have to care for our children. We have to work hard. That's the way we have to deal with things. And so we just don't really deal with that. And so that is our biggest problems in our disproportionate areas, is that we don't really deal with mental health, and men don't deal with mental health. That's another thing too, is that when they're dealing with problems, they take it out on families. Women are also a big thing. When they're upset and when we're angry, we will take it on our kids, we'll take it out on our men, but men won't say anything. And so that's another thing with our Black, brown, and other community, is that when they get domestically abused, they will not report because they're afraid, oh man, my boys is gonna make fun of me. You know, my boys is gonna start saying I got domestically abused by my girl, and that's a big problem within our communities because of that. Instead of dealing with the problem firsthand and saying that it's okay to say you have been harassed by your girlfriend, you've been domestically abused. And it starts with our teenagers. We have got to have a language and verbiage to speak with our young men and say, listen, it's okay to talk to your mom or dad and say, listen, my girlfriend pushed me today and I don't even know how to address it. And I don't know how to deal with it. I was really glad to meet 108 organization. And it was the first organization that I've met where it was men, Black men, talking about domestic violence. Domestic violence, and saying it is not okay to put your hands on me. It is not okay for you to harass me. It is not okay. This is not okay. Absolutely. And so we need to talk about it. We need to have verbiage with our young men and teach them that, and also talk to our women too, that it's not okay to put your hands on, men. It's not okay, and right. We had to learn that.
Because as a man, you're taught that never hit woman.
Right.
I was taught that by my mother. I'm not saying everybody teaches that, but sometimes, a woman's going to push every single button. And some people don't, in a relationship, don't even think that they feel love unless you argue with them. Right. Unless you are in some kind of real aggressive kind of situation. I don't want to go left there, but I was just being the man on here. I figured I'd just throw that out there. If you just tuned in, this is Black people and brown people. Okay, we'll do Black and brown versus domestic violence, even though we know that it affects every color, every sex, men, women, everywhere. Right. Thank you, everybody. It's some great information that's being put in the chat that will be here in history forever. If you guys also know of places where people can get help, put that in the chat as well. Okay. Right. It's stereotypes, because domestic violence, when we were backstage, you were saying a lot of things fall under that people don't even. But before I get your answer, again, Cindy, it was so good I had to stop us because we were having a whole show before the show.
Sorry.
What are we hearing on these digital streets about domestic violence?
Oh my goodness, so much, and it was so easy because, again, it is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so I could easily go on Instagram and Twitter right now and just put in domestic violence, and so many hashtags come up and people are having these conversations, but not everyone is fully informed. And so I appreciate that the conversations are happening, but here are some of the stereotypes that I found. So first, and let me make it known that some of them might be true, but none of them are at all representative of the Afro-American newspapers.
Thank you for our legal disclaimer.
All stereotypes and stigmas found on the internet. Okay, no one please sue us later, and or say that the Afros are giving us false information.
Yeah.
So, domestic abuse is common in Black and brown communities because of generational trauma. Domestic violence is learned behavior. Domestic abuse is more widely accepted in communities of color. Domestic abuse does not always mean you have to leave your partner. Domestic abuse is a sign of a toxic relationship. Domestic abuse can improve in a household with therapy. Domestic abuse is often discussed now due to TikTok and Reels for relationship red flags. Domestic violence has become more common during the pandemic. Over-explaining or excusing domestic abuse is a sign of trauma. Domestic violence isn't as common because there's a lot of awareness surrounding it. More people are informed about domestic abuse. Domestic abuse resources are plentiful. People don't know who they can trust in domestic abuse situations. For many people, it's easier to stay with an abuser. Leaving an abuser should be easy. Now just record your abuser for protection and proof, and you're safe. Again, these are from the digital streets. Oh, wow. We have our other special guest here on the show, our other expert, right in time to combat these stereotypes and stigmas. So first of all, before we even get to the you guys combating and these stigmas and stereotypes on the digital streets, let me introduce our esteemed guest who is in his tie and ready to give us some knowledge today. He is a speaker, activist, event organizer, Navy veteran, retired law enforcement officer, Roper Academy alumni, and Maryland Certified Victims Advocate Specialist. This is just a little bit about him. Again, another one of those people who does not sleep. In fact, I heard the two of them were at the rally that Cynthia is the founder of just last week together. And we are so happy and honored. And now, do I say Monty or Ricardo Burrell? Which one is it?
It's Ricardo Monty Burrell.
Ricardo Monty Burrell. Thank you so much for being on today's show and taking the time out with us today. We really, really appreciate it.
No problem. Sorry I'm late. I was trying to connect with my phone. I ended up pulling out my laptop. I guess that's better.
You're right on time. You're right on time, because we were talking actually earlier this morning about some of these stereotypes and the stigmas surrounding domestic abuse and intimate partner violence. And so could you tell us a little bit about have you run into these stereotypes, and how in your work do you combat it? And then we'll hear from Cynthia as well.
I would say the stereotypes that I ran into from being in law enforcement, it was a lot of victim blaming. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people always say, well, she shouldn't have wore that, or because you stayed in a relationship, this happens to you. And it's a lot of victim blaming when it comes to domestic violence or violence against men or women. And you basically had a stereotype that if they stay, they weak, or if they stay, they deserve it. And sometimes they really don't have that option. Some people burn bridges, some people stay because of love, but it's a lot of different stereotypes that go with why a person actually stays.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna say, Cynthia, hop right on in, because I saw your face as I was saying some of those stereotypes.
Yeah. I agree and disagree with a lot of those stereotypes. And the reason why that is because I did see one speaker one time that said, they asked her, why did she stay? And she said, I never even knew that I was domestically abused. And so a lot of domestic violence abuse victims don't even know they are domestically abused, and some might. But some don't know that it is domestic violence. They just know that they're in a relationship that is unhealthy. But they don't know that it's domestic violence until somebody points it out afterwards. And so it's very hard for them to leave, because there might be factors that are playing into their relationship. There might be children that are involved in their relationship. So it's very hard for them to leave, because they feel that if they leave the relationship, who is going to take care of them and their children? There might be a factor in their relationship where there might be a disabled individual. And so the other individual is a person who's their caretaker. And so how can they leave that relationship? Because that person, although they're physically abusing them, mentally harming them, physically aggressive to them, and psychologically aggressive to them, they're their only caretaker. They're in a wheelchair. They can't leave. Who's going to care for them? There might be a situation in, like I told you guys before, they might not have their papers to be in this country, and they're waiting for their papers from INS. I mean, from the legal system, so they can be legally in this country. And so the problem is that they might be harassed by the other person saying, I will call INS on you. And so they get physically harmed, they get domestically abused, their children might be abused. And so they will stay in that situation because they don't want to leave, because they're afraid if they do, that other person.
It appears that we're talking some great stuff. This is Black People versus Domestic Violence. Cynthia, they're trying to freeze us. I don't know why. Okay, you're back, because thank you everybody who's tuning in the chat and tuning in today, because we're finding out some people who may have not been. But when you bring this definition, then and you find all of the things that come under domestic violence, probably everybody has been in some form or fashion. You know, it's not just the uncle that inappropriately touches you stereotype. You know what I mean? It's not just the mother's boyfriend, you know, that does something when you're not home. You know, it's way more than those stereotypes. Or those might not be stereotypes. They may be true stories, right? That happen, but it goes far beyond those true stories. And thank you for everybody, the men who hold things bottled up through their life, who just and then become angry and maybe explode in another area because of something maybe at a young age or something that happened to them that they just you know, they would feel awkward sharing, because it's like, that's not, you know, like when boys fall down and they say, get up, you tough, don't cry, you know what I mean? So they already teach you at a young age to repress just a real feeling. You're hurt. You know what I mean? God gave everybody eyes. You know what I mean? Men cry in church. Men cry with the Holy Spirit. Men cry when they're upset. You know, real men cry as well, as, you know what I mean? That doesn't change who you are. But Ricardo, I'm glad Ricardo fought through about 10 devices to get on today.
Can I add something to what Cynthia just said? Can I add something to what Cynthia just said?
Absolutely.
So the one part when she said you might not know you're in a domestic violence relationship, and I talked to how you say your name, Miss Green. I talked to Miss Green this morning, and I gave her an example of the movie Purple Rain. A lot of people, everybody know Purple Rain, but when they saw it, they didn't recognize Prince as an abuser, Prince as a stalker, Prince as a controller. And it was learned behavior from his father that was doing it to his mother. So even though he didn't like his father mistreating his mother, he ended up with the same behavior. And a lot of us looked at that movie as just entertainment. And then they looked at it as, okay, she ended up with him at the end. He was a superstar and she stuck through it. And some people would not even look at that as an abusive relationship. But he was an abuser. He was a controller. He was a stalker. And she was in a domestic violence relationship. And they never associate that with Purple Rain.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, that's really, really good.
Yeah, because actually sometimes I'll tell my kids, like if my sons are talking to their sister a certain way, you know, man, and I'm like, you know, you just don't talk to women in that way. And then the sister will be like, oh, that's just my brother. But you have to come to a point where you can't accept that at any age, and you have to learn that is some type of abuse verbally happening and seeking into mentally. Then it means that maybe you will accept if another man is talking to you in that situation, so you can realize a sign of a person even in a courting relationship, even before you grow up. This is Black People versus Domestic Violence. You on the Chicken Box, where we're speaking our truth. We have Ricardo Monty Burrell, and also Cynthia Pagan Hale, right?
Yes.
Did I say it? I don't want to say. I'm never gonna say pagan. I'm not gonna do it.
You say Pagan, that's fine. Pagan.
And we are having a conversation that needs to be had. Of course, we're not gonna fully get it all. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Why October, guys? Is it any rhyme or reason, or just said, hey, it's too much going on in the other part of the year?
And you know what? It was picked by the National Domestic Violence Awareness and the National Hotline. And so that's when they chose October was actually chosen by the National Hotline, and actually it was chosen by the coalition. So October was chosen by them, by the National Coalition. Yeah.
And before the show, we were talking about domestic violence could be also, you said human trafficking, right? And sex trafficking. Okay, so what are the number one cities or states right now for that?
So the highest American cities for human trafficking cases right now are Washington, D.C., of course, is number one. We do have issues with Atlanta, Georgia, and Charlotte, North Carolina are in the running for number two.
Wow.
So and then Orlando, Florida is number three, of course.
You don't think about it, but I traveled to the airport a lot, and I saw a guy who looked like a guy who wouldn't be with a girl, but she was so silent, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and then I saw a sign that you can report these things in the airport, but it really looked like, you know how a person looks like they really don't want to be there, but they're never gonna say that they don't want to be there. You know what I mean? And it really, and then with all of the things that were happening in the Atlanta area with the R. Kelly situation,
right?
Because and that whole thing and that whole television show and all of those things, and even the guy who knew his daughter was there, and I would have burned that whole building down. I'm just telling you, me as a father, I would have blew it up. My daughter wouldn't have been in there. I don't care what kind of mind, whatever, you know what I mean? He came on the show, but he wouldn't even have to worry about me in the show, Ricardo. I might have I would have slept outside.
Well,
they better never come. I would have burned that building.
I'll say something to.
Go ahead, Ricardo.
I'll say something to your comment on what you was talking about at the airport and how you might see a person in a situation like that. Two things, good and bad. They have things online where you can look up silent signs that a victim might do as far as certain hand gestures or something like that. But the thing about it is the abuser also looks online and see these signs also. That's why when I was a police officer and I did my domestic violence programs, I would tell the women, you can hang something out your window or do something different. So no, especially if it was a problem house. We would just have you hang a towel out the back window. He would never know it. I met women in the nail salon and in the hair salon and in the gynecologist's office, places where I knew guys would not go. Because the abuser, a lot of time, he has control over every place she goes. So certain places, they won't go. The nail salon, they're not going to sit in there. Hair salon, they're sit in there. When she go get checked, they're not going to sit in there. That's where people need to start passing out information with domestic violence, so where you can give out different signs and codes if you need help. But don't go by the necessarily you see online. They can help you, but the abuser also looks at those also.
Yeah. And a lot of traffickers are changing their tactics nowadays. Like before, it used to be that they would brand their, their prospective person. They had branding, which was called their tattoos on the person. Now they no longer brand. They might brand, but they're catching on. The Blue campaign and also the Department of Homeland Security is like catching on to that. Then it used to be the nail polish. If you see the same nail polish on a guy and the same nail polish on one finger on a girl, then you know that person's being human trafficked by that guy. That's his pimp. You know what I mean? And so they're changing up their tactics on what they're doing with that prospective person. So there's a lot of tactics that are now being caught by the Department of Homeland Security and, by the Department of Justice. So, when we hear stuff, we also are also catching up so that we know exactly what's going on to a lot of people who are being sex trafficked or human trafficked. And the thing is a lot of power and control that happens to a lot of these persons who are sex trafficked or human trafficked is the same thing that happens to a lot of people who are being domestically abused. They're being coerced. They're being emotionally abused. They're being isolated, intimidated, economically abused, sexually abused. They're minimized. They're denied a lot of things. And so the same power and control wheel is being used on them as it is a domestic violence victim.
Right. The threat of I'm going to kill your parents. I am going to, like you said, if you're a legal immigrant in the country, I'm going to have you back, deported. But I like the things Ricardo was sharing as a police. I forgot my thought because there's so many information. I'm reading the thread and everything else. But just about how does a person, when are people taken seriously? Does the law enforcement kind of just brush over these kind of crimes when people call? Because sometimes, and I'm not going to say, sometimes it's somebody is blowing a whistle on somebody and they haven't done anything to them. You know what I mean? And they're saying that they felt threatened or whatever. But how does law enforcement look at domestic violence cases?
I know when I first started law enforcement, it was looked at and taken very serious. But somehow it got watered down because homicides improved, went up, increased. And then it got kind of pushed to the side because you do have victims that or lie and they're not really victims. Then sometimes it's just pushed to the side. It's not taken serious. But the thing is, you have to find people who go that extra yard. Not all police officers do, and not all advocates do. Some people will take a course, be certified, and their heart isn't in it. A lot of times, if you talk to a person, you can tell if their heart is into it or not. And just because they carry a title doesn't mean their heart is into it. And I know as a victim, it might be frustrated. You talk to an officer and he's like, okay, what did you do? What did you do? What part did you play? And it sounds like you're being a victim all over again, but you still have to keep reaching out until you reach somebody that will sit down and talk to you and have that heart. And you can understand them better than you can that person that's just cold. So you shouldn't give up.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys. We're getting to, this is a conversation that probably, I'm going to put in the chat, we could have a part 2 because Ricardo got on late. He had a technical challenge, but I think because October is Domestic Violence Month, and this is such a huge, we could just break down just one part and spend a year on that. You know what I mean? I think, Misha, maybe it's worth taking a shot at part 2. I have my dog in the background agrees, but I'm thinking that the conversation should continue. Jocelyn said, "Do it weekly." We would if this was the domestic violence show. This is the chicken box, Jocelyn. But we have different topics, different times. But we want to spend attention to this enough to at least start the conversation in our communities. At least fathers begin to talk to their daughters, mothers begin to talk to their daughters, and their sons. You know what I mean? Just to have an open communication. Don't get so busy that your children can't think that they can talk to you. You know what I mean? And and you have to share these things. And sometimes these are a tough conversation, and they want to TikTok it off and fool it, but it's real, and it will become real when it happens, and then they're silent, and then you didn't know what was happening in your own house just because you're too busy to communicate. That's a whole nother show. But a part 2 will definitely happen.
Well, I do think, I see Jocelyn's comment, maybe just doing this month only. I do think next week we will have a version of part 2 where we'll talk a little bit more about survival, but with our guest who's already confirmed for next week and available for next week. She's a domestic violence survivor, as well as a multiple cancer bout survivor. So we're going to talk to her. And if Cynthia and Ricardo are available, then they could come right on down. I know, Cynthia, you're speaking at a lot of events this month.
I am. I'm actually leaving tomorrow. I'm leaving tomorrow to Illinois.
Yes, I saw your a little glimpse of your crazy calendar. I'm sad because you can't just give us all your time, but you're giving tons of people your time. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing this month during Domestic Violence Awareness Month?
Yeah. So I will be in Illinois tomorrow, in Danville, Illinois, for the domestic violence rally there in Illinois, and then I will be back here and leaving to go to South Carolina for the Hush No More domestic violence walk. I think it's their 8th annual. They asked Domestic Violence Rally and FFT Helping Others to actually gather together with them and a couple other organizations to actually walk with them in solidarity for domestic violence. So we'll be there for Hush No More. And then on the 9th, or I think it's the 9th, I will be on a virtual as well for domestic violence. And then on the 30th of October, I'll be in Florida, and I hope Ricardo will be there too in Florida and also the mayor and Representative Waltz down in Florida for the domestic violence conference that we're having down there, where our mayor is going to actually talk to us about domestic violence. And the committee member who actually had her family member went through domestic violence herself.
Wow. I'm so thankful for you all being on the show today. And I'm just so inspired by all of our guests who are sharing their stories in the comments. We really appreciate your transparency. And we are so thankful that you are able to share your stories and have sort of come out on the other side, seemingly as advocates and as people to help others during some of the hardest times in their lives. And so we thank you for being on the show as well, our audience members. You guys are just as much as part of this show as anybody else. So we really appreciate that.
So we got 30 seconds. This is where we all hop on the box and speak our truth. You know, whatever your truth is about this situation. And I know 30 seconds can't cover it all. And Lenora, Misha, can you get the editor at the Afro email?
Yes, it's editor@afro.com. And I think we can pop it up in.
Yeah, I'll pop it up. But Lenora said that this is her wheelhouse. She wrote a book about it. She loved to come on next week, and let's try to make that happen.
Yes, actually, Lenora, go ahead and just send an email to my personal email address. It's not a secret. It's on every single one of my articles. That's mgreen@afro.com, mgreen@afro.com. Please just go ahead and send me an email, and we can definitely make that happen. The more people who can speak on this issue, the better. And selfishly, I'm also going to just do this plug before we go ahead into our moment on the box, our final 30 seconds on the box, which is, can you all please, if you have a personal thought on this comment, we want to include this in our special edition next week. And this question is, if you could ask God one question, only one, what would it be? If you feel comfortable sharing it in the comments, or if you want to send us a private message, please do so. I'd love to include your thought on this in my article. If you could ask God one question, what would it be? So go ahead. And again, if you also want to email that to me, that's mgreen@afro.com. Okay.
We got our 30 seconds on the box. We'll let Ricardo Monty Burrell. Go ahead. Domestic violence. Anything
All right.
else you want to share? Let's go.
I'm going to share for the men out there. A lot of times we are looked at as strong and will help our women, will help our nieces, any woman in our family get in trouble, we'll go to their defense. But the thing is, men have to start speaking to these young women before things happen. That's the thing. They know they can come to us once something happens, but we have to speak to them before it happens. Also, people who spending all this time, and I'm gonna make some people feel uncomfortable, as I say, move in your seat, being divas, ordering from Amazon, all this stuff you do online, download some material and pass it on to these younger guys and girls before they start dating and relationships. Talk to them. All these divas out here, all these men out here, all these guys that want to be the man and all this, talk to these younger people because they're the next ones that's coming up, that's facing this stuff, and it's predators that's waiting for them.
Thank you very much. Misha, I'm gonna put you on mute because you're in the car. They're trying to silence men. Black men, brown men, stand up. They can't silence us. They can't silence us. Go ahead, Misha.
So my 30 seconds on the box, I just want to really encourage folks to do research from these accredited and reputable organizations that are talking about domestic violence and learn about the resources that are available and to share this stream. I also want to just quickly share one thing that I noticed only in the past hour that we've been talking about is the double standard of not talking to young women about not hitting other people. Again, I have heard tons of people say, don't hit a girl to a young man, but it's never the other way around. And so let's not have any sort of gender bias. Domestic violence has no gender bias. And so us talking to people about respect and personal space really is important, and respecting one's personal space. And so I have been so enlightened, and I thank our experts for being on today's show. I'm off the box.
Cynthia, you're on the box.
Well, my biggest thing while I'm on the box is to let everybody know, if you are dealing with domestic violence, please make sure that you call 1-800-799-7233. That is the 1-800 hotline for domestic violence. Know that whatever the issue may be.
Say that number one more time.
1-800-799-7233, which is 1-800-799-SAFE, SAFE. And you can always go on there. If not, you can text the number. Just text 88788 and just text START.
Okay.
And if you feel unsafe to call, just text it instead. And it's easier to text sometimes, especially when you're being domestically abused. You can just go ahead and text the number and you feel a little bit safer. If you're in the DMV area, you can always go to Bethany House, a domestic violence shelter for women and children. They will accept anybody. It's www.bhnv.org. They will take people all the way from Pennsylvania down here, anywhere in this area. So please, and if you have to get out of your computer immediately, they have an escape out of your computer, and so does the hotline website. We want you safe. Don't just leave your home and think that you can leave immediately. Leave safely. So just don't take anybody's advice and says, leave now. Wait for somebody to give you a good exit plan, and be safe. Be safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. This is the Chicken Box broadcast on the Afro-American newspapers. 129 years of informing, educating, and inspiring. For less than $2 Uber Eats, you can have a digital Afro subscription. That's right. Go to afro.com right now. No one controls our editorial. No one controls our pages, and no one ever will for the next 100 years. My 30 seconds on the box. I was at a funeral yesterday, and what I got from my cousin who passed away from his son was his dad taught him how to be an essential worker. And so you hear that word essential worker, but you have to become an essential worker in your family. You have to become an essential worker as a husband, as a man, as a woman. You have to be an essential worker that not only thinks about what you do, but helping others. And so, and also be an essential worker doing your due diligence in topics that are more than entertaining, because we can, if we look at our time, the smartphone is so smart now, it'll tell you exactly what you spent your time on. And it's somebody right next to you right now that you don't even know that's going through some type of abuse. And it's not just the abuse that you think is happening, it's the abuse that you don't think is happening. So this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I'd like to thank Cynthia, Ricardo, and of course my co-host Misha Green. Dr. Draper is traveling, and we'll have her join in the conversation when we come back. But look, hush no more rally. Listen, it's not time to be quiet. It is time to share with family and friends that you trust to get you through this situation. So until next week, everybody, thank you, everyone. Toya, we see you. Chippy, we're praying for you, for everybody who's commented. Q, Shay, Jocelyn, Lenora, email Misha, Craig Talley, all the brothers who were part of the conversation. Keep sharing, and the healing will continue. So until next week, I'm Kevin Impeccable Beck. Have a great weekend, and go Ravens if you're from Baltimore. That's the purple too, Misha.